The Battle of Naseby, by Anonymous. By 5 o'clock in the morning, the whole army, in order of battle, began to descry the enemy from the rising grounds about a mile from Naseby, and moved towards them. They were drawn up on a little ascent in a large common fallow field, in one line, extending from one side of the field to the other, the field something more than a mile over, our army in the same order in one line with the reserves. The king led the main battle of foot, Prince Rupert the right wing of the horse, and Sir Marmaduke Langdale the left. Of the enemy, Fairfax and Skippon led the body, Cromwell and Rose to the right, and Ireton the left. The numbers of both armies so equal as not to differ 500 men, save that the king had most horse by about 1,000, and Fairfax most foot by about 500. The number was in each army about 18,000 men. The armies coming close up, the wings engaged first. The prince with his right wing charged with his wonted fury, and drove all the Parliament's wing of horse, one division excepted, clear out of the field. Ireton, who commanded this wing, give him his due, rallied often and fought like a lion, but our wing bore down all before them and pursued them with a terrible execution. Ireton, seeing one division of his horse left, repaired to them, and keeping his ground, fell foul of a brigade of our foot, who coming up to the head of the line, he like a madman charges them with his horse. But they with their pikes tore them to pieces, so that this division was entirely ruined. Ireton himself, thrust through the thigh with a pike, wounded in the face with a halberd, was unhorsed and taken prisoner. Cromwell, who commanded the Parliament's right wing, charged Sir Marmaduke Langdale with extraordinary fury, but he, an old tried soldier, stood firm and received the charge with equal gallantry, exchanging all their shot, carabines and pistols, and then fell on sword in hand. Roster and Whaley had the better on the point of the wing, and routed 2 divisions of horse, pushed them behind the reserves where they rallied and charged again, but were at last defeated. The rest of the horse, now charged in the flank, retreated fighting, and were pushed behind the reserves of foot. While this was doing, the foot engaged with equal fierceness, and for 2 hours there was a terrible fire. The king's foot, backed with gallant officers, and full of rage at the rout of their horse, bore down the enemy's brigade led by Skippon. The old man, wounded, bleeding, retreats to their reserves. All the foot except the general's brigade were thus driven into the reserves, where their officers rallied them, and brought them on to a fresh charge. And here the horse, having driven our horse above a quarter of a mile from the foot, face about and fall in on the rear of the foot. Had our right wing done thus, the day had been secured, but Prince Rupert, according to his custom, following the flying enemy, never concerned himself with the safety of those behind, and yet he returned sooner than he had done in like cases too. At our return we found all in confusion, our foot broken, all but one brigade, which though charged in the front, flank and rear, could not be broken, till Sir Thomas Fairfax himself came up to the charge with fresh men, and then they were rather cut in pieces than beaten, for they stood with their pikes charged every way to the last extremity. In this condition, at the distance of a quarter of a mile, we saw the king rallying his horse and preparing to renew the fight, and our wing of horse coming up to him gave him opportunity to draw up a large body of horse, so large that all the enemy's horse facing us stood still and looked on, but did not think fit to charge us, till their foot, who had entirely broken our main battle, were put into order again and brought up to us. The officers about the king advised his majesty rather to draw off, for since our foot were lost, it would be too much odds to expose the horse to the fury of their whole army, and would be but sacrificing his best troops, without any hopes of success. The king, though with great regret at the loss of his foot, yet seeing there was no other hope, took this advice and retreated in good order to Harborough, and from thence to Leicester. This was the occasion of the enemy having so great a number of prisoners, for the horse being thus gone off, the foot had no means to make their retreat, and were obliged to yield themselves. Commissary General Ireton, being taken by a captain of foot, makes the captain his prisoner to save his life, and gives him his liberty for his courtesy before. Cromwell and Roster, with all the enemy's horse, followed us as far as Leicester, and killed all that they could lay hold on straggling from the body, but durst not attempt to charge us in a body. The king, expecting the enemy would come to Leicester, removes to Ashby de la Zouch, where we had some time to recollect ourselves. This was the most fatal action of the whole war, not so much for the loss of our cannon, ammunition and baggage, of which the enemy boasted so much, but as it was impossible for the king ever to retrieve it. The foot, the best that he was ever master of, could never be supplied. His army in the west was exposed to certain ruin, the north overrun with the Scots. In short, the case grew desperate, and the king was once upon the point of bidding us all disband and shift for ourselves. We lost in this fight not above 2,000 slain, and the Parliament near as many, but the prisoners were a great number. The whole body of foot being, as I have said, dispersed, there were 4,500 prisoners, besides 400 officers, 2,000 horses, 12 pieces of cannon, 40 barrels of powder, all the king's baggage, coaches, most of his servants, and his secretary, with his cabinet of letters, of which the Parliament made great improvement, and basely enough caused his private letters between his Majesty and the Queen, her Majesty's letters to the king, and a great deal of such stuff to be printed. Note the Battle of Naseby, fought on June 14, 1645. The king's forces were routed, and his cannon and baggage fell into the enemy's hands. Not only was the loss heavy, but it was made more serious by his correspondence falling into the hands of the parliamentary leaders, which exposed his dealings with the Irish Roman Catholics. The most remarkable point about this description is the air of reality which Defoe gives to his account of an event which took place nearly 20 years before his birth.